Well, welcome to the Board on the Corner New Year's Special, also known as the first annual Douchebag of the Year Award. And there were certainly some interesting nominations sent in by the fans. The Douchebag of the Year Award goes to a publicly known figure who, through stupidity or bad attitude, made a rather embarrassing show of him or herself in 2008. Before we get to the winner, let's look at some honorable mentions. Our runner-up and most popular Canadian choice is Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He gets this incredible honor for not only deciding to do absolutely nothing about our dying economy during the worst crisis in 80 years, but for constantly using shameful, cowardly, undemocratic, and even illegal means to turn this country into, dare I say, a right-wing dictatorship. Instead of following the route of every other Western country and doing something about our crisis, he chose to stop pay equity to women and trying to bankrupt the other parties. This culminated in something of a mini-civil war in early December, when he not only turned Canadians against each other by calling a majority that has the power to get rid of him illegal, undemocratic, and un-Canadian, but by taking the route of many dictators and suspending Parliament. If you think I'm being silly, look up Napoleon, Hitler, Franco, and Mussolini, just for the basics. The presently unknown men who hit Hamilton teen Dick Perkins with a car, dragged him for hundreds of feet, and then left him for dead. Basically, putting a belt sander to anyone is beyond me, never mind a teenager who was just hanging out with his friend. Let's move on. Getting into the original nominees sent in by the fans, here's one submitted by Andrew Carter, anti-video game lobbyist and former lawyer Jack Thompson. This guy not only tries to pin the blame for all of society's problems on video games, instead of, for instance, poverty and piss-poor parenting, but when he does so, he is so blatantly homophobic, sexist, abusive, and slanderous that he actually managed to get himself disbarred earlier this year. While we're at it, there's also the idiots who steal cars and stab cab drivers because they think they're playing the Grand Theft Auto games in real life. There's also author Cooper Lawrence for trashing the sex scenes in the game Mass Effect without even playing it. She later admitted that she had only heard of the game just prior to being interviewed on Fox News about it, and when she finally did see it, found it less graphic than most episodes of Lost. Too bad she needed to have her ass kicked on national television before she finally admitted to being careless. And finally, another fan nomination, this one from Make Parcham, the shopping parasites in the US who were so obsessed with finding great deals on Black Friday that they trampled people, shot at people, and then whined like crazy when the stores had to be closed over that, because they camped out for 2 or 3 days for the sake of a fucking discount. God bless us, everyone. But the winner this year was a very clear one, and I am honestly not at all surprised. There are those who I felt more strongly about in the last few weeks, but unlike some of the people on this list, I actually care about people's thoughts and votes. So, ladies and gentlemen, by popular demand, the 2008 Douchebag of the Year is Sarah Palin. Much of the reason for this probably goes without saying by now, but let's take a look. This time last year, hardly anyone outside of Alaska had even heard of the controversial vice presidential candidate. So it really says something when, in less than 6 months, a person goes from a total unknown to one of the most ridiculed and hated politicians in recent memory. How did that happen? Well, a huge part of it is that much of her campaign was shrouded in hypocrisy, like the fact that she had even less experience and about as much tabloid friendliness as Barack Obama, who she and John McCain frequently criticized as a rookie celebrity. Then there's her frequent accusations that Obama sided with radicals and terrorists and not really being American, when she herself was blessed by a so-called witch hunter, her church believes in reprogramming gays, and her husband was a member of a hard right-wing Alaskan Sovereignty Party. So it's okay for a white Christian family to hold highly violent and intolerant views of gays and pagans, to be part of a party that actively wants to separate America, yet it's not okay at all for a mixed heritage man to have been around an ex-terrorist when he was a child, to have a pastor who feels like blacks are still being marginalized by the government, which is largely true, and who believes in changing the status quo to actually represent all Americans. By the way, don't even get me started on how Palin very blatantly used her children as political props. Though I must say, that did expose just how open and accepting right-wingers truly are about teenage unwed pregnancies, at least when it happens to one of their more wealthy comrades. Or how she and John McCain not only encouraged the anti-Obama bigotry, but ignored the fact that most Americans, right and left-wing, are fed up with the divisive fear-mongering of the Bush years. Remember how they claimed that only the red states were pro-America? Then there's the way she tried to prove that, despite having never been outside the U.S. prior to the election, she was completely up to the job of being one heartbeat away from the Commander-in-Chief's office.
What other Supreme Court decisions do you disagree with?
Well, let's see. There's, of course, in the great history of America, there have been rulings that there's never going to be absolute consensus by every American, and there are those issues, again, like Roe v. Wade, where I believe are best held on a state level and addressed there. So, going through the history of America, there would be others, but...
Can you think of any?
I would think of any, again, that could best be dealt with on a more local level. Maybe I would take issue with, but...
What newspapers and magazines did you regularly read before you were tapped for this to stay informed and to understand?
I've read most of them, again, with a great appreciation for the press, for the media.
Specifically, I'm curious that you...
all of them, any of them that have been in front of me over all these years. I have a vast variety of sources where we get our news to. But ultimately, what the bailout does is help those who are concerned about the health care reform that is needed to help shore up our economy, it's got to be all about job creation too, shoring up our economy and putting it back on the right track. So healthcare reform and reducing taxes and reining in spending has got to accompany tax reductions and tax relief.
Specific examples in his 26 years of pushing for more regulation.
I'll try to find you some and I'll bring them to you. And if you want specifics with specific policy or countries, go ahead and you can ask me. You can even play Stump the Candidate if you want to.
So, Governor Sarah Palin, who somehow became the first woman to ever be nominated for Vice President of the United States. Congratulations on winning at least one thing this year, the 2008 Douchebag of the Year Award. You truly deserve it. Now, before you try to send the CIA after me for posting this, which I wouldn't put past you, let me try to explain something. The reason why you have a lot of people criticizing you is because when you try to apply for any major job, it's reasonable to expect that you know how to do it. So, when you give interviews or propose policy about anything, you're supposed to know what the hell you're talking about. A lot of people, even staunch conservatives, have used this as a reason to say that you are not up to the job. Take a hint. Enough said, and Happy New Year, everyone.